My name is Yossef Slotnik. I live and teach in Ma'ale Gilboa. Ma'ale Gilboa is a kibbutz up north in Israel, not too far from Bet Shean. We have a yeshiva here, and that's where I've been teaching for the past 20 somewhat years. As you can hear my accent, I'm American born, but don't be fooled by my accent. I grew up in Israel, moved to Israel when I was 4, so all my English is strictly from TV. What I want to do tonight is introduce or actually tonight and the next few shurim we're going to have, I want to introduce you to a book called Avot de-Rabbi Natan. One can already deduce from the topic, from the title of the book, Avot de-Rabbi Natan. Avot, we all know the Mishnah Masechet Avot, ethics of our fathers. Avot de-Rabbi Natan is ethics of Rabbi Natan. So who is this Rabbi Natan? We know of a Rabbi Natan who is one of the biggest disciples, Talmidim of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who actually penned the Mishnah. So one of his students is called Rabbi Natan. So from the title pushes us in the direction that this is the Masechet Avot written by Rabbi Natan. Although the title is very compelling, likely that's not the case. What is the case? When was this book actually written? What was the book about? Likely, it's a book that has evolved over quite a few centuries. In fact, from the end of the Mishnah till probably the early times of the Geonim, we have 2 strands, one found in Eretz Israel, one found in Europe, with many different manuscripts for each strand. I won't go into all the intricacies. What I will say is that reading Avot de Rabbi Natan is as close to reading a Talmud on the Mishnah, just on Masechet Avot, which means sometimes the text will be prone to simple interpretation. Sometimes the text will be informative. Sometimes the text, quite often, will be agadic, and will take a concept from Pirkei Avot and expand them to great length. Not every sentence in Masechet Avot was actually described or expounded on in Avot de Rabbi Natan, but quite a bit has. And what I want to do over the next 4 lessons is give you examples of that. Give you examples, and my hope is that you'll fall in love with this book as much as I have and delve into it. Now, it's in your house. Anybody who has a shas on his in his library or her library has Avot de Rabbi Natan. Right after Masechet Avodah Zarah, which we're learning in Daf Yomi now, after Masechet Avodah Zarah, in the Shas is Masechet Avot, obviously with no Gemara. And right after Masechet Avot, there's Avot de Rabbi Natan. It appears in any one of your Talmud sets. And what I simply did was, in the source sheet that I brought you, is copy-pasted the text and copy-pasted the translation of Sefaria. Not because I necessarily agree with it, it's just very, very available. So what we're going to do is I want to show you how it works. And before I delve into the very first chapter of Avot Rabbi Natan, I want to give you an example. So I'm loading up the sheet. I believe people got sources as well, correct? I'm hoping that you all got this source sheet. If
If
you
you
did
could
not,
post a link to the source sheet here, that
okay,
would be helpful.
okay, I will do that. This first of all, it's going to be on your screen, and second of all, I will post it as well in the chat. It'll take me one more second. Excuse me. Um, hmm, sorry. Um, one second. I apologize. Where's the chat? Here. Hmm. Will take me 1 minute, so hold on there. Um, Should have done that in advance. I'll learn for next time. Um, if somebody has it, if they could put it in the chat, that would be helpful as well. Then I know it's done.
All set. Thank you, Alana.
Just posted.
Oh, someone did it already? Okay, great. So thanks so much. So I'm gonna load it up in front of you, and the first Mishnah of Masechet Avot is very like slides off our tongue so easily. Moshe kibel Torah misinai mesara liYoshua. I'll get to the beginning in a second. I want to speak about the last part of the Mishnah. The last part says, Hem ameru shelosha devarim. The Anshe Knesset Agdola said three things. Havim utenuim badin. Ha'amidu tamidim arbe. V'asu siyag laTorah. The third the second thing the Anshe Knesset Agdola said was, teach a lot of Torah, have many disciples. So I just want to share with you very briefly what Avot de-Rabbi Natan says about this. And we'll just give you a taste of what I mean when I'm talking about interpretation of Masechet Avot. The Avot de-Rabbi Natan says, and I'm quoting here from chapter 3 on Avot de-Rabbi Natan, Ha'amidu talmidim arbe, shebet Shammai omrim, Bet Shammai say, Al yishne adam ela lemishu chacham, anav, ben avot, ve'ashir. Bet Shammai say one should only teach Torah to a person who's wise, humble, has good yichus, so pedigree, and rich. Now you understand that that's their interpretation of Ha'amidu Tamidim Arbe. That's their reaction. When the Mishnah said, Ha'amidu Tamidim Arbe, teach Torah to a lot of people, Bet Shammai say, one second, why should you teach Torah to many people? What's the goal of teaching Torah? Surely the goal of teaching Torah is to make Talmidei Chachamim. That's why you have yeshivot, to create the next generation of religious spiritual leaders, Talmidei Chachamim. So why bother teaching everybody? Let's fine-tune the group. Let's get rid of the riffraff and only teach the people who potentially could become Talmidei Chachamim. Who are those? So find people who are wise, humble, because if they're not wise, they won't understand it. If they're not humble, they're filled with gaiva, they're too haughty to be religious leaders. They have good yichus, and they're rich, so they're not reliant on anybody else. You already made your sample group smaller. Out of that sample group, Talmidei Chachamim will come. Now, therefore, Bet Shammai is saying, when the Mishnah said, Ha'amidu Talmidim Arbe, it didn't really mean go teach every Tom, Dick, and Harry. It meant go Talmidim Arbe, only people who might be Talmidei Chachamim. But don't waste your time on anybody else. Bet Hillel say, Ma pitom? Bet Hillel omrim, Lechol Adam Yishne, teach everybody. Why? שהרבה פושעים היו בהם בישראל, ונתקרבו לתלמוד תורה, ויצאו מהם צדיקים, חסידים וכשרים. Bet Hillel say, no, teach everybody. Why? Because there were many sinners, פושעים, in Israel, and once they started learning Torah, נתקרבו לתלמוד תורה, they even got close to learning Torah, they went through a metamorphosis, ויצאו מהם צדיקים, חסידים וכשרים. And out of them came righteous, tzaddikim, kind, and proper. Now note what Bet Hillel isn't saying. They're not saying they learned Torah and they became Talmidei Chachamim. They're not saying, look, Rabbi Akiva, he started this way and ended up that way. They're not saying that. They're saying, Bet Shammai, I don't agree with your premise. You think learning Torah is to create a new cadre of Talmidei Chachamim and religious leaders? Ma pidam. That's not the point. The point isn't to teach Torah to Talmidei Chachamim. The point is for the Torah to be an ethical, religious experience for everybody because it will affect everybody. Now, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel are arguing on a very essential question. Why are you people here on Wednesday afternoon, or for me, Wednesday evening, to learn Torah? Bishvil ma? What's the end goal? And Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel are arguing about that point. Bet Shammai is saying the end goal is the Torah to exist generation after generation. And it's really a very elitist idea. And it's not for everybody. So don't bother teaching everybody. And Bet Hillel is saying Torah is a tool. It's a tool for becoming a committed, religious, fine human being. If you'll be a Talmid Chacham as well, Metzuyan. But that's not the goal. And therefore, Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel here are arguing about the goal, but they're arguing in the context of the Mishnah. The Mishnah in Avot said, Ha'amidu tamidim arbeh. Later generations are trying to explain, Bishvil ma? What's the purpose? What's the goal? That's what I mean when I say the Avot de Rabbi Natan is like a Gemara to Masechet Avot. It's a Gemara in the sense that it will take statements of the Mishnah, just like the Mishnah in Masechet Brachot says statements, and the Gemara in Masechet Brachot discusses them, and the Mishnah in Masechet Zvachim says things, and the Gemara in Masechet Zvachim discusses them. The Mishnah in Masechet Avot says statements. Avot de Rabbi Natan will discuss them. Sometimes just explain, sometimes elaborate, sometimes go on a tangent, sometimes go to the depth of religious experiences, because Masechet Avot is about religious ideas and ethics. So Avot de Rabbi Natan is much more inclined. You're not going to find there questions of kashrut or questions of intricate sveka and migo. You're going to find discussion of ethics. But later generations discussing earlier statements in the Mishnah and ask interpretation questions about them, ethical questions about them, and go off tangents after them. That's Avot de Rabbi Natan. That's why it's such an exciting book and full of surprises from all kinds of different directions. I want to talk about the very, very first Mishnah, and I just want to see you to see me as well, so that's why I keep loading and unloading, but hopefully it's not too disruptive. I want to talk about the Mishnah a second, the beginning of the Mishnah. Pretty much every kid in 4th grade knows how to say this Mishnah by heart. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, mesara leYoshua, Yoshua lezkenim, zkenim leNeviim, Neviim mesaru leAnshei Knesset HaGdolah. This Mishnah is teaching us the lineage of the Torah. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai, transmitted it to Yoshua, Yoshua to the elders to the prophets to the great men of the great assembly. Now, and indeed, Masechet Avot takes the ball and runs with it from that point on. And the first chapter of Masechet Avot speaks about the Torah going generation after generation, what we call the Zugot, the couples of Chachamim, Yossi ben Yoezer, Yossi Ish ben Freda, Yosef ben Shmaya, Valtarion, Hillel, Shammai. We have the generations of the couples, and then we have the generations afterwards of the Tanaim. Masechet Avot is a continuation of this passing of the Torah. However, I want to ask 2 questions about this Mishnah. First is a very linguistic question. Notice that it says, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai u'mesara liYoshua. ונביאים מסרוה לאנשי כנסת הגדולה. And indeed the translation makes that distinction. Moshe received the Torah at Sinai and transmitted it to Yeshua. The Mishnah is making a distinction between Moshe and the rest. Moshe received the Torah, he transmitted it to Yeshua. מה ההבדל? Why not say Moshe קיבל תורה מסיני ויהושע קיבל ממשה? זקנים קיבלו מנביאים. Why not use the same term? What do you gain from changing the term? So that's a linguistic question. It's a syntax question in the Mishnah. The Mishnah clearly chose to separate Moshe from the others, and they're separating it by terms of language. They're not telling us why they're separating it, but the Mishnah clearly differentiated Moshe from everybody else. So that's question number one. Why make that distinction? And question number two is a much more severe question. באמת? Moshe קיבל תורה בסיני? Moshe got the Torah of Sinai? What happened to the 600,000 men standing at the bottom of Har Sinai and the 600,000 women who were standing right next to them? There's 2 million people there getting the Torah of Sinai. We all got the Torah of Sinai. The Torah itself in Sefer Dvarim speaks about that there was a covenant, a brit kruta, velo itchem levadchem karat et habrit hazoti. God made a covenant with the people of Israel, and Moshe tells us that the covenant for all generations. The covenant is the Torah. What do you mean Moshe kibel Torah misinai? That is an extremely elitist sentence. In fact, when the Rambam, in the introduction to his commentary on Pirkei Avot, the Rambam quite right says the world is split into the good ones and the not the not good ones, but rather their servants. And only the really wise people are worthy of the word. The rest of us are just around to, Rambam uses the word to amuse them, to have conversation with them. It's too lonely to be in a world that only has 3-4 people. Therefore, there are millions of people, so we can create a whole society. But really, the point is the Moshes and Yoshuas. The Rambam says this, and the Mishnah really said it before him. Moshe קיבל תורה מסיני ומסרה ליהושע. הוא לא מסר את זה לא לאהרון ולא לנדב ולא לאביהו ולא ל12 השבטים. He didn't give it to anybody else. Moshe got it, and he gave it to one person. And in fact, if you ask who has the Torah, every generation has one person. Now, that is shocking. That's much more extreme even than what I showed you before in Bet Shammai. That is not just saying that only teach Torah to those who are worthy of it. That's saying really the Torah, every generation had its gadol. Find the gadol. Torah etzlo. Now, as a person who's been learning Torah since I was a little child and has dedicated my life to teaching Torah, I must say this sentence is almost offensive in the sense that it's making the Torah a very secluded idea, a very one-person type of place instead of it being for the masses. That's question number two. So I'm reading the Mishnah and I'm asking myself two questions. I'm not going to interpret my answers or bring you other commentaries. I want to give you the answers that I believe Avot de-Rabbi Natan gave. Some of the parts gave to both of the questions, some of the parts just to one. But I believe at the foundation of the chapter of Avot de-Rabbi Natan that we're going to read together, these answers are what's irking the writers, and they're giving, I believe, 3 different answers. I named them section 1, section 2, and section 3 because I didn't want to give away. And I'm reading it from the end to the beginning. If you scroll down, you see here where it says here, Masechtot Ktanot Avot de-Rabbi Natan. So I simply did a copy paste from the text in Project Shut. I'm reading from the end to the beginning simply because the end will be much simpler and the beginning is much more difficult. So I'm going to start us off easy. So I'm reading in section 3. It's at the end of the first page on the bottom. The sentence says, Yehoshua קיבל ממשה, שנאמר ונתת מהודך עליו, למען ישמעו כל עדת בני ישראל. Line 2, זקנים קיבלו מיהושע, שנאמר ויעבדו העם את השם כל ימי היהושע וכל ימי הזקנים, אשר האריכו ימים אחרי יהושע, אשר ראו את כל מעשה אדוני הגדול אשר עשה לישראל. The elders received the Torah from Yoshua, and they quote a pasuk from Sefer Shoftim, describing the role of the elders who were around right after Yoshua, before the judges actually came around. Line 3, Shoftim kiblu mizkenim, shene'emar vayi b'yimei shvot hashoftim. The judges received from, I shouldn't say Yoshua, I should really say here elders, sorry. The judges got from the elders, as it says, ויהי בימי שפוט השופטים, נביאים קיבלו משופטים, שנאמר, וישלח אליכם את כל עבדי הנביאים יום השכם ושלוח. So the prophets received from the judges, as it says in Yirmiyahu, I sent you prophets, many prophets. חגי, זכריה ומלאכי קיבלו מנביאים, חגי, זכריה ומלאכי received the Torah from the earlier prophets. These three prophets were the prophets at the beginning of the Second Temple era. אנשי כנסת הגדולה קיבלו מחגי, זכריה ומלאכי, הם אמרו שלושה דברים, היו מתונים בדין. Now, this is, section 3 is the last part of this first chapter of Pirkei, of Avot de-Rabbi Natan. And I believe it does 3 innovations to the Mishnah. Innovation number 1, note, they changed the word. Lo, Moshe kibel Torah umesara liYoshua. It doesn't say Moshe received the Torah and transmitted it to Yoshua. It says Yoshua received from Moshe. Zkenim kiblu miYoshua. It changed the word. This is a paraphrasing of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah was very meticulous in saying Moshe kibel v'Yoshua v'masar liYoshua. Avot de-Rabbi Natan in section 3 is erasing that distinction. There is no distinction between Moshe and Yoshua. They're one and the same. So that's innovation number 1 they're doing. Innovation number 2, and again, it's a commentary. They're proving it. The Bavli, reading Mishnayot, thousands, if not millions of times, ask the questions, Menah Nimili. The Mishnah says a statement, and the Gemara always asks, how does the Mishnah know it? Where did it learn it from? What's the pasuk in the Torah or Tanakh proving this? Avot de-Rabbi Natan is answering that question. How did the Mishnah know? Moshe kibel v'mesara liYoshua v'Yoshua lezkenim. How did you pick these people? So for each one of their people, for each persona, they're bringing a verse to prove it. And innovation number 3, they made the list a little bit longer. They added the judges, and they added Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi. But having said those 3 innovations, they didn't dramatically change the Mishnah. The Mishnah is correct, still 1 per generation. Perhaps we have to lengthen the list a little bit longer, but it's still 1 per generation, or a group per generation. Second innovation was they brought proofs for anything. And the first innovation was there is no distinction between Moshe and the rest. Thus, answering my first question, why is there a distinction? They answered, there is no distinction. Not accepting question number 2, really? One in the generation? And they said, yes. Okay, so that's section number 2. And then number 3, I'm moving back to section number 2, which things will get slightly more exciting. Okay, so I'm reading here.
Excuse me, could you share the screen? This is being recorded.
I thought it was shared. My mistake. Okay, so I am just because it wasn't shared before, I'll just show you quickly. You see here, that's where it says Yoshua kibel mi Moshe and Zkenim kiblu mi Yoshua. And Shoftim kiblu miskenim. That just to prove the last word I said. Okay, so I'm moving back to section 2. Section 2 starts also with a paraphrasing of our Mishnah. I'm reading the first sentence. Al yedei Moshe nitna Torah beSinai. Now, the original statement was Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. The paraphrasing of the sentence by Avot de Natan is Al yedei Moshe nitna Torah beSinai. The Torah was given at Sinai through Moshe. Notice this paraphrasing does wonders because it is saying that Moshe is indeed distinct, but Moshe did not receive the Torah. Moshe is a medium through which the Torah was given. Who was the Torah given to? Doesn't say yet, but let's read on. Shene'emar, and they quote a pasuk because it's an interpretation. Shene'emar vayichtevem al shnei luchot avanim vayitnem elai. Here's a pasuk proving that Moshe did not receive the Torah. Vayitnem elai, aval lehalan hu omer. Later on it says, Ele achukim v'mishpatim v'atorot asher Natan Hashem beino uven bnei Israel behar Sinai biyad Moshe. Now, Avot de Natan is as if asking a contradiction between two psukim. The pasuk in Dvarim and the pasuk in Vayikra. The pasuk in Dvarim says, God gave the tablets to Moshe. The pasuk in Vayikra says, God gave the chukim, mishpatim, the Torot, he gave the laws, the teaching, the eternal, he gave as a covenant, beino uven bnei Israel, beyad Moshe. So it's almost seemingly a contradiction. Who received the Torah, Moshe or the people? Avot de Natan is answering this contradiction by its very first sentence. Moshe indeed received the Torah, but al yedei Moshe nitna haTorah. Moshe received it in order to give it. He is just the messenger. He is just the medium. He is just the go-between. God gave Moshe the Torah, but he is not the end goal. He didn't give him the Torah to keep. He gave him the Torah to give on. To who? The Bnei Israel. And if you weren't convinced yet, the Avot in line 2 continues and says, Torah shenatan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael lo netana ela al yedei Moshe shene'emar beino uven bnei Israel zacha Moshe liot shaliach ben bnei Israel hamakom. God gave the Torah by Moshe. Now, don't think that that's a small feat. He didn't choose me to give the Torah. He didn't choose Aaron to give the Torah. He chose Moshe to be the medium. Zacha Moshe. Moshe merited to be the messenger between Bnei Israel and God. But it's a merit. He's not the end goal. So, section number 2 goes back to the first line in the Mishnah, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, and it says, really? Moshe? Where's everybody else? And they're saying, no, Moshe is just the messenger. He's the go-between. He's the one supposed to give the Torah on. It's a big zchut, but it's just a go-between. So when I say Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, I'm not focusing on saying, oh, the Torah is only by one person in every generation, Moshe, then Yoshua, then Zkenim. No. One person in every generation is responsible for spreading the Torah in the entire generation. It's a responsibility. It's not an end game. Moshe didn't receive the Torah. Moshe received the job to be the shaliach, to make sure that Am Yisrael gets the Torah. For lack of time, I'm not going to read line 3, but you're welcome to read it yourself. In line 3, it continues to give us other examples of other types of messengers, like Moshe built the Mishkan. Do you think Moshe built the Mishkan for to be for Moshe? Ma bitam. Moshe built the Mishkan. He inaugurated the Mishkan. He made it working possibility so everybody can use it. It's not the Mishkan for Moshe, although one could have said Oil Moed is a place where God calls Moshe. And the Avot Natan slams his hand on the table and says, Ma pitam, ha-Mishkan lebishel kulam. Moshe creates a Mishkan. Elazar, Aharon's son, he makes a parah adumah. What does he make the parah adumah for, the red heifer? To purify the people of Israel. He's the messenger. Moshe received the Torah as a messenger. So section 2, unlike section 3, is disagreeing about the role of Moshe. Now, I'm going back to my initial 2 questions. I initially said, why did it make a distinction between Moshe and everybody else? Section 3 said, the distinction is between Moshe and the people, but not between Moshe and everybody else. Moshe and Yoshua are the same. But Moshe and Yoshua are different than everybody else. That is correct. They're the leaders. They're special. The Torah is for them. Section 2 is saying, Ma pitom. They are not the end goal. It doesn't answer number 1. Why is Moshe distinct from everybody else? It didn't give an answer to that question. But it argues and says, Moshe is not distinct from everybody else. Moshe is not distinct from the people of Israel. He is the worker of the people of Israel. And I want to go back to section 1. Section 1 is a little bit longer. It also starts with a paraphrasing of our Mishnah. I remind you, if you look again at the Mishnah starts with Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Okay, remember these 4 words, Moshe kibel Torah misinai. Now look at the paraphrasing of the sentence. Moshe nitkadesh ba'anan ve'kibel Torah misinai. Now, the paraphrasing is really just adding 2 words. Nitkadesh ba'anan. Moshe was sanctified in a cloud and received Torah misinai. I don't agree with this translation. I'll tell you in a second why. But first note the paraphrasing. It took the 4 words of the Mishnah, Moshe kibel Torah misinai, and it added 2 words and a vowel. Nitkadesh ba'anan ve'kibel Torah misinai. The Nitkadesh ba'anan means he was sanctified in the cloud. Now, in my opinion, these 2 words are answering a question. Lama Moshe kibel Torah misinai? Lama Yoshua lo kibel? Why did Moshe receive the Torah, not Yoshua? Why was he chosen? And the answer is because he was sanctified in the cloud. And I remind you the beginning of Parashat Yitro and the end of Parashat Mishpatim, where God's cloud, God's divinity comes into the cloud, lingering on top of Mount Sinai. And Moshe is called up into this mountain, to this cloud, and he stands there. Avot Natan starts off, we'll see in a second that it's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Glili, and he says Moshe was sanctified in this cloud. Moshe wasn't just standing in a cloud, waiting, twiddling his thumbs. At that point, Moshe is being sanctified, and if you want to know why Moshe was able to bring Torah misinai, why was he able to bring the Torah down, why was he able to receive the Torah? He had to be sanctified. He was no longer like regular mortals. He is distinct. If you ask me why Moshe kibel and the rest are Mesara, why Moshe received and the rest was transmitted, because Moshe indeed was different. Was he born different? No. He became different. He was sanctified. His level was raised. What did this to him? Standing in the cloud. I'm sure at this point you're asking yourself, why, how? But wait a second. I'm going to read the entire sentence. Moshe nitkadesh be'anan. Moshe was sanctified in the cloud. The kibel Torah misinai. I told you I want to disagree with the translation. So I said the addition was two words in a vowel. The two words are nitkadesh ba'anan, was sanctified in a cloud. Nitkadesh ba'anan, kibel Torah misinai. In the English translation here, it said Moshe was sanctified in a cloud and received Torah from Sinai. The translation makes it sound like these are two characteristics or two events happening to Moshe. He was sanctified in a cloud and he also received the Torah. These are not two events. The Vav is not Vav Achibur, the Vav of addition, the Vav of and. It's not that type of Vav. It's the Vav of therefore. Since Moshe nitkadesh ba'anan, since Moshe was sanctified in a cloud, therefore he was able to receive the Torah from Sinai. And therefore I don't agree with this word and, but that's just me. And the sentence continues, Shene'emar, in the end of Parashat Mishpatim, Vayishkon kvod Adonai al har Sinai leMoshe letaharo. זה היה מעשה אחר עשרת הדיברות, דברי רבי יוסי הגלילי. Rabbi Yossi Glili explained that the psukim in Mishpatim are chronologically spoken after Moshe was heard, or the people of Israel heard the Ten Commandments. After the end of Aseret HaDibrot, Moshe went down, was called back up to the mountain for 40 days or 40 nights, and the beginning of the 40 days, the 40 nights, he stood on the mountain for 7 days. Why? Letaharo, to purify him, to sanctify him. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Glili. In line number 2, which I will not read, Rabbi Akiva argues, and he says this is not an event that happened after Ma'amad Har Sinai, after hearing the Ten Commandments. That is rather the Moshe going up and standing in the cloud actually precedes the Ten Commandments. I will not go into the argument between Rabbi Akiva, just simply for lack of time. So Rabbi Yossi Glili says, Moshe Rabbeinu, the chronology is, first of Sivan, the people and Moshe all arrive in Midbar Sinai. They sit around for 6 days waiting for Matan Torah. On the 6th day or the 7th day of Sivan, there's Matan Torah. The day after, Moshe receives a calling to come up to the mountain. He stands there on the top of the mountain for 7 days. And at the end of 7 days, God starts speaking to him. Why do you need the 7 days? Says line 3. So we already heard the terminology of sanctification and purification. But there's actually an argument about it. Amar Rabbi Natan, I'm reading in line 3. Amar Rabbi Natan, מפני מה נתעכב משה כל 6 ימים ולא שרה עליו דיבור, בשביל שימרק מכל אכילה ושתייה שהיה במעיו, עד שעה שנתקדש ויהיה כמלאכי השרת. Says Rabbi Natan, I know what Rabbi Yossi Glili said. I know Moshe is standing on the top of the mountain for 7 days to purify him, but how did it work? What happened in those 7 days? So says Rabbi Natan, why was Moshe held back for those 6 days without God actually speaking to him? So that he could be emptied of all the food and drink that was in his stomach. So that when he was sanctified, he would be like the angels serving God. He needed, in order for Moshe to be the middleman between the earth and the heavens, for Moshe to be the middleman so he can bring the Torah down from the heavens, he needs to be like an angel. And being like an angel means he needs to separate from his body as much as he can. So for 7 days and 7 nights, he doesn't eat, he doesn't drink, he a little bit removes himself from his, it's like us on Yom Kippur, we do it for 1 day and we get to the davening of Ne'ilah and we get to our spiritual high. Moshe did it for 7 days so he can reach the peak of his existence, his purity, in order to be able to receive the Torah. That's Rabbi Natan. And now note, Rabbi Natan is explaining the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Glili. He's explaining why Moshe had to wait for 7 days. Why didn't God speak to him the first day? He calls him up, start talking. Why wait the 6 days? Moshe needed to separate, to empty it out from all food and drink that's in his body, till he will be able to be sanctified, till he'll be able to be like the angels. Now, we all know many midrashim that we've come across in our past, that Moshe speaks to the angels, he argues with the angels, he fights with the angels about who the Torah belongs to. Moshe needs to be in the realm of the angels, and therefore he cannot carry this physical body with him. He needs to separate from it 6 days of no eating and drinking. That's the opinion of Rabbi Natan explaining his rabbi, Rabbi Yossef Glili. Amar le Rabbi Matya ben Charash, Rabbi, no. Master, you're wrong. לא אמרו, אלא לאיים עליו, כדי שיקבל עליו דברי תורה, באימה, ביראה, ברטט, בזיע, שנאמר, עבדו את השם ביראה, והגילו ברעדה. Master, no. Why do they keep him there for 6 days? To terrify him. So he would receive the Torah in terror and awe, trembling and sweating, as it says, serve God in awe and rejoice with trembling. Gilu berada. If anybody ever read the book of the article of Rav Soloveitchik, The Lonely Man of Faith, without quoting this passage from Avot Rabbi Natan, this is in essence what Rav Soloveitchik says as well. Moshe Rabbeinu goes up on Mount Sinai and he stands there waiting for the word of God. And nothing happens. So he waits another 10 minutes and nothing happens. And a day goes by and he said, God called me to give me the Torah. Why isn't he speaking to me? And he starts doubting himself. And he starts doubting his position. And maybe he did this wrong or that wrong, or maybe he's not worthy of receiving the Torah. And days go by, hours, minutes, excruciating religious, spiritual pains, breaking him as a human being. And only once he was a broken human being, he can be open to receiving the Torah. That's what Rav Soloveitchik says. I got to be honest, I never liked that. Personally, it was really a different type of description of religion for me than anything I felt in my life. But that's what Rav Soloveitchik describes. Far be it for me to argue in. But that is what Rabbi Matya ben Charash says. Moshe Rabbeinu stands on Har Sinai to argue with God. No! To stop being human. But how? Not by not eating and not drinking. By losing your self-identity. La'amod be'ima, bi'ir'ah, beretet, bezia, stand in terror, awe, trembling and sweating. Only once you're in that position, you can actually receive the Torah. Now, I want to take a step back a second and say, and going back to my initial question. Remember the initial question. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. And I asked you two questions. Really? Rak Moshe? Where's everybody else? And Moshe kibel, v'mesara liYoshua, Moshe received and transmitted. Why is he distinct? And we saw three answers. Answer number one is, you're wrong. Moshe and Yoshua are the same, but they're distinct from us. Second answer was, no, Moshe is not distinct because Moshe is not the end goal. We're the end goal. Section number one says you're wrong twice. Moshe kibel, Moshe is distinct. He's distinct from us. He's also distinct from Yoshua. You cannot describe the same process of Moshe learning Torah and Yoshua learning Torah. Yoshua learned from his rabbi, and the elders learned from Yoshua, just like people today are learning from their rabbis. The process of learning from your master is one process. Moshe did not have that process. Moshe learned Torah on the top of Mount Sinai. His Rebbe was God himself. Moshe inherently is distinct, says Rabbi Yossef Glili. Moshe is different. Moshe stopped being human. so he can receive the Torah and give it on. Yeshua didn't stop being human. Yeshua kept being human. But Moshe's learning Torah is distinct from everybody else's. What made Moshe distinct? Standing on the mountain for 6 days before the Torah started. What happened in those 6 days? That's the argument between Rabbi Natan in line 3 and Rabbi Matya ben Charash in line 4. Rabbi Natan says he became non-human by not eating and drinking for 6 days. Rabbi Matya ben Charash said it's not a physical thing, it's a mental thing. After 6 days of silence, he was able to learn Torah in awe and in fear. And then Avot Rabbi Natan seemingly goes on a tangent. And a short story. Maaseh, line 5, Maaseh She'ira beRabbi Yoshia uveRabbi Matya ben Charash. Two Tanaim, two Mishnah people are learning together. Rabbi Matya ben Charash is the person we just saw in line number 4, and he's learning with a gentleman called Rabbi Yoshia. Hayu shneim yoshvim ve'oskim b'divrei Torah. They're both sitting and learning. Peresh Rabbi Yoshia l'derech eretz. Rabbi Yoshia got up after a couple of hours of learning, gets up to go l'derech eretz, literally meaning the way of the world, which literally means he probably went to work. He learned for a couple of hours, but I have to feed my family, so he closes the Gemara and he goes to learn to work. Amar le Rabbi Matya ben Charash, so his friend and co-learner says to him, Rabbi, ma lecha la'azov divrei Torah? How can you leave divrei Elohim chayim velishtof b'derech eretz? Rabbi, how can you abandon the words of the living Torah, living God, the Torah? And again, the translation is immerse yourself in the way of the world. Now, again, I don't agree with the translation. Lishtof b'derech eretz doesn't mean to immerse yourself. It means to wallow, like a pig wallowing in his dirt. You're closing your Gemara and you're going to work. You're leaving the holy words of God, and what are you going to do now? Watch Netflix? What's the point? Very harsh words, and he continues and says, "V'af al pi she'ata rabbi, v'ani talmidcha," even though you're the rabbi and I'm just a disciple. And I surely should not be speaking this way to you, but I don't have a choice. En tov la'azod divrei Elohim chayim v'lishtof b'derech eretz. I can't hold back. It can't be right that that's what you're doing. Doesn't say what Rabbi Yoshia answered, but it does say in line 7, Amru kol zman sheyoshvim ve'oskim b'Torah, היו מקנאים זה לזה. כשנפטרים, דומים כשהם אוהבים מנעוריהם. And it's said about them, about this couple, Rabbi Matya ben Charash and Rabbi Yoshia, while they were learning, they would be zealously arguing with each other, real fighting and yelling. But once they separated from each other, they were like young lovers parting. Line 7 doesn't sound at all like line 6. Line 6 sounds like they're arguing when they're leaving. But nevertheless, apparently they continued their chavuta. Apparently this was a couple that learned for many years together. And they always learned together, and they always argued. And they still loved each other, but there's a real big argument between them. Rabbi Matya ben Charash has a claim, and Rabbi Yoshia, although isn't answering him, clearly is not convinced because they continue to part ways every so often. It seems to me that their argument is about, is Moshe really distinct? Rabbi Matya ben Charash said, well, we're learning from Moshe that the only way to learn Torah is in awe, trembling, fear, gilu bera'ada. That's how we learn Torah. That's what we do. So if that was good enough for Moshe, that needs to be good enough for me. So when I sit and learn Torah, I need to be trembling and in awe. Now, if that's my mode, how do I ever stop? I'm standing in front of God. I'm in awe, petrified, broken, just listening. And then I can stop and go to work? Bilti Efshari. And Rabbi Yoshia, my guess is, says, no, that's how Moshe learned Torah. Yoshua received the Torah. Moshe, the first person to bring the Torah from the heavens down to earth, he needs to be trembling. I need to be juggling. I need to learn and work and family and bet midrash and find the way and find the balance. We're not the same. And I believe the argument between Rabbi Matya ben Charash and Rabbi Yoshia is Moshe the model or Moshe is the exception? And I think that the Mishnah itself, by making a distinction between Moshe and Yoshua and the Zkenim, is saying Moshe is the exception. Although Moshe, that's how he learned Torah, and according to Rabbi Yossi Glili, he learned Torah out of fear and in awe, but that's Moshe. The Torah for us has to be different, has to be part of our life, not breaking our life. Now, I want to go again, take a step back, and then I'll leave some room for questions. I started off by introducing you to Avot de-Rabbi Natan. And the words I used was Avot de-Rabbi Natan is an interpretation like a Gemara on Masechet Avot. And I believe that you now concede with your own eyes. There's a statement in the Mishnah that Moshe kibel Torah miSinai Sarah leYoshua that irked the later commentaries and said, what's going on here? And they had to grapple with it. Some grappled with the question of why is Moshe distinct from us? Some grappled with the question of why Moshe is distinct from Yoshua. Some asked the question, what is the goal of learning Torah? Why did Moshe receive the Torah? But these questions of, when I open the Torah and learn, what's the point of it? Am I trying to be a Talmid Chacham? Am I trying to be Moshe? Am I just trying to learn? What's the relationship between me and the Gdolim? If the Gdolim know everything, so why do I bother learning? I think that the opening of Avot de-Rabbi Natan is putting into question the premise of the Mishnah in Avot. The premise telling us that the Torah is really reserved only for the select few. Avot de-Rabbi Natan is putting that question, that premise into question, and I believe that it gave two ways of dealing with it. One is saying, no, we're the end goal, not Moshe, section 2, and section 1 saying, no, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, aval ma ze omer li? Should I try to be Moshe? Should I be distinct from Moshe? So I believe that these questions are left open, but I believe are a lot for food for thought. So I will end here and see if anybody wants to jump in and ask some questions or give some insights. Not all at once. See if
let me see here.
Okay, so here no one. Okay, so in that case, nobody has any questions. We will end here. And
somebody raised his electronic hand.
Oh, sorry.
Be very polite.
So don't be so polite. I'm Israeli. No need to be polite.
Well, I also put it in the chat like I did with the other classes, but I don't know. I had a question on the word Talmidim Harbe. Talmidim is masculine, but did it include including everyone in Talmidim, or just men? Because of the mitzvah of Limud Torah is only for men.
Presumably, it only meant men. But I mean, there is a machloket in the Tanaim much later than in Sheikh Knesset Gdolah about should a father teach his daughter or not. There is a machloket in the Tanaim about it. I don't know that, but the statement of Anshe Knesset Gdolah going back to the beginning of the Second Temple era, I don't know of any information about that. Sorry.
I had another question, and using the word kibel and the word Masorah. I thought Kibel is left for Moshe directly from Hashem, and the Masorah is for the other people after that. Except for the first few Aseres HaDibros, everyone received from Moshe, not from Hashem
I
directly.
mean, you're in good company. That's how the first interpretation read it as well. Although you saw that the third interpretation changed the word Masar to Kibel, so they obviously did not agree with it. So I believe what your statement is how the first section would interpret it, but as we saw, there's a debate about it in Avot de-Rabbi Natan itself.
Okay. Thank you. Toda Rabba.
Bakasha. What Mishu? Here, there's oh, I do see you wrote Talmidim is masculine. Okay, in that case, I will leave you for tonight. ושניפגש בעזרת השם בשבוע הבא. Same time, same place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.